Hello again. The Practical Animal channel is dedicated to the public understanding of conservation, and every week I interview a conservationist. Today, my guest is Vikash Tataya, Conservation Director for the Mauritius Wildlife Foundation and an expert on the Mauritius kestrel. In the 1970s, the Mauritius kestrel was the world's rarest bird. I began by asking him if the Mauritius Conservation Programme was the most successful in the world. Vikash, is the Mauritius Kestrel Project and all the associated conservation projects on Mauritius, taken collectively, is the Mauritius Project the most successful conservation project in the world?
I think if we are not the most successful conservation program in the world, we're definitely amongst those. Of course, you have countries such as New Zealand that would top the ranks in terms of conservation. Seychelles, not very far from us, does very well. Costa Rica is also one of those countries that's renowned for its conservation. But definitely Mauritian wildlife is in the league of the leading conservation programs in the world. Some of the successes would include rescue of at least 5 species of birds that would have gone extinct. These include the Mauritius kestrel, the Mauritius echo parakeet, the pink pigeon, the Rodrigues fody, and the Rodrigues warbler. On top of that, the Rodrigues fruit bat has been saved from extinction. We estimate that we've saved around 100 species of plants, and either they've been saved from extinction or their trajectories are much better than what they would have been without our intervention, both on Mauritius, Rodrigues, and offshore islands. And we've also sensitized hundreds of thousands of people, both on Mauritius and Rodrigues, to awareness. So I think it's a metric that we don't value enough in terms of making people aware of what is their natural heritage. We've also saved at least half a dozen different reptiles from extinction: tailfair skinks, Gunther's geckos, and one that would definitely have gone extinct, which is the orange-tailed skink. Places such as Round Island were going to be destroyed by rabbits and then ensuing soil erosion, loss of plants, loss of vegetation. And Îles aux Aigrettes, which was under the threat of invasive plants and animals, all of these habitats have been saved from further degradation. We do rank amongst the leading conservation programs in the world.
What can you tell me about this fantastic landscape behind you? I recognize it, but can you describe what it is, where it is?
Those 3 trees would have been there when you were on Round Island in 1990 or 1991. They've been around for a long time. This is on Round Island. And this is the gully. We call this the sort of valley behind me is what we call a gully on Round Island. It's now called the Toilet Gully because not very far from down there, there'll be the toilet, the loo. And not very far behind me, if I was on Round Island right now, is where our field station is. So this is Round Island, which is an island about 23 kilometers north of Mauritius, and which is well renowned for the reptiles and the plants that survived on Round Island for one simple reason: rats never got there. Rabbits and goats were introduced in the 1800s, and they were eradicated in 1979 for the goats and 1986 by ourselves for the rabbits. And the plants started coming back after that, but the weeds also came back faster. So there's had to be a big weed control effort on this island, which continues to this day. But we've actually been recreating forests on the island. So the hardwood forest, which was described in the 1800s and which had completely gone, is now back in places on the island. We've got a field station. We have staff that are permanently based on the island on rotations. Our presence on the island has actually cut down to zero poaching of seabirds, which happened up to 1997. So there hasn't been any poaching since 1996, 97.
Vikash, what is the Mauritius Project?
We are the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation. We are registered as a charity organization, and we have been conducting works on Mauritius, Rodrigues, and offshore island to save plants and animals from extinction. And the Mauritius Project now is nearly 25 different projects that we run: kestrels, echoes, pigeons, Mauritius forties, olive white-eyes, buccal shrikes, paradise flycatchers, and so on. It's also projects to look after islands such as Round Island, Îles Aigrettes. We have projects on Rodrigues for restoring nature reserves. We also have education programs. We do ecotourism at two sites, Îles Aigrettes being one, but also at a place called Grand Montagne Nature Reserve in Rodrigues. We employ over 100 people, but we also have staff and volunteers that come from abroad. People can come and work for several months, sometimes a year, so sometimes several years, and some become permanent. There's a high turnover. This is how that we estimate that over the years, we've had 3,000, probably 4,000 volunteers, staff, students. We have quite a number. We produce quite a number of PhD students as well. We think we've had staff from probably around 60 countries.
You are the Conservation Director of the Mauritius Wildlife Foundation. What is your connection with the wildlife, the birds and the ecosystems of Mauritius?
First of all, I joined conservation in 1997. Although I had met the scientific director and one of the major founders of the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation in 1995, and that's Professor Carl Jones. I joined at the bottom of the ladder and gradually climbed my way to the top. And I'm currently in charge of the plant and animal conservation programs. We have very capable staff. These guys are running it very, very well. So I really don't need to get involved that much in a lot of matters, and they are just doing it themselves. Also, I get involved in the policy of the organization as well. So I'm the member of the board of the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation. So it's not just in terms of what happens on the ground, but also what happens in terms of the strategy of the organization. For the past 20 years, we've also become more of an outgoing organization rather than being inward-looking. We've been outward-looking quite a lot, which is why we started developing education programs and why we started doing ecotourism. And we also get involved in national policy. So, for example, we contribute and to a large extent guide things such as the policy on invasive alien species. We are involved in climate change discussions, national biodiversity strategy and action plans, trying to mitigate human-wildlife conflict over Mauritius fruit bats. But something else which is becoming a problem in Mauritius are monkeys, invasive monkeys that are now causing a lot of problem in many areas. So we get involved in things which are not the core conservation that you would have joined 30 years or 20 years or 25 years ago. So we participate in a lot of conferences where we share our experience and knowledge, and we learn from others as well, because we can't pretend that we know it all. Last week we had South Africans who came to Mauritius to give a training on plant propagation. So although we've been working on plant propagation for 30 years or more, we still imbibe any knowledge or any skills that we can get. We actually welcome a lot of foreign expertise and skills. Something which, as a small island, we may not necessarily have.
Vikash, what do rats have to do with conservation of endangered species in Mauritius?
Quite a lot, in fact. Mauritius never had predators. Rats got here probably 600 or 700 years ago. Rats started decimating the plants and animals of Mauritius. And the most well-known extinction is, of course, the dodo. But rats haven't just been responsible for destroying birds, especially ground nesting birds. They can also climb onto trees and where they predate eggs and chicks. But they also have a very big impact on plants. We control rats, and on islands we have eradicated rats. We are now developing techniques that go away from use of poisons. So for a long time we're using brodifacoum, which is an anticoagulant, and now we've gone away from anticoagulant because the New Zealanders have developed a nice little gadget called A24, which is a self-resetting trap that uses a CO2 gas to recharge a needle, and it's got a law in it, and it is when a rat is being too curious and goes up and is attracted by this lure, the spin goes through the brains and it is dead. And there's this mechanism for recharging for the next kill. And the beauty of this machine, invented by the New Zealanders, and who else would have done that, is that it uses no poisons. So we're getting away from poisons, which unfortunately can stay in the soil, can stay in the environment for a long time, and have got some unwanted effects on non-target organisms, especially in the soil. We're getting away from that, and we are looking at creating something called mainland islands, places on the mainland. It's relatively free of rats, to put back olive white-eyes, which is a critically endangered bird of Mauritius. And we are hoping that this area will be free of rats, so that cuckoo shrikes will find better nesting success when the rats are under greater control in that area. So yes, we have a long association, or shall we say dissociation, with rats, because we try to exterminate them wherever they are, and we try to control them. So they're not our best friends, and we do everything to reduce the number of rats for the greater benefit of our birds, our reptiles, and of our plants.
Vikash, the Mauritius kestrel, the echo parakeet, the pink pigeon, the Mauritius cuckoo shrike, the olive white-eye, the fody. How would you describe conservation of these birds on Mauritius today?
The 1990s was a very important point, because it was at that point that a number of surveys of surviving passerines on Mauritius was being conducted by Roger Safford, John Beaumont, and a few others. And we continued those surveys, and it showed that those populations were declining. And we did something called marooning, but we prefer to say reintroduction of the Mauritius fody and the olive white-eye onto an island called Île aux Aigrettes, which is one of the islands that we manage. Small island, 27 hectares, close to the mainland. It's around 800 meters from the mainland of Mauritius, but which had the advantage of having no monkeys, no rats, and we were restoring the vegetation. And believe it or not, on that tiny island, we got up to 400 Mauritius fodies. There were more Mauritius fodies on that island than on the mainland of Mauritius. We nearly reached 70 olive white-eyes on that island. We learned that the olive white-eye we wouldn't be able to get hundreds of olive white-eyes on Île aux Aigrettes, because they are a highly territorial bird. And the size of the island only allows us to get to around 70 birds. So we have nearly 70 olive white-eyes on Île aux Aigrettes. We were able to actually downlist the Mauritius fody from critically endangered to endangered just by that action. So we recently did a management plan for the olive white-eye. We've also worked with the cuckoo shrike. The cuckoo shrike went extinct there at the same time as the Mauritius kestrel in those mountains found on the east of Mauritius. And we actually brought some cuckoo shrikes into captivity. We reared them in captivity. We raised them in captivity, and we did a release of birds in in the East Coast mountain. I mean, our greatest success has actually been on Rodrigues. In the 1970s, the Rodrigues warbler was thought extinct. And the Rodrigues foley was down to, now there are thousands of both species. This definitely ranks as the most resounding passerine conservation success stories. Sadly so, and this is our fault, is we don't publicize it enough. And it's probably a greater conservation success story than many of the other bird projects that we've done. And, the magnitude of increase. We've done very well, I would say, with the Mauritius 40, and we're doing great strides on the Mauritius olive white-eye, for which we've even done a number of studies. We supplementary feed those birds in the wild, where we are releasing them. And with habitat restoration, the nectar that's produced and the insects that are produced by the better vegetation that we have helps to support them in the wild.
Vikash, what are some of the techniques that have really originated in conservation in Mauritius?
I think the captive breeding has been something quite important. And I think where we haven't necessarily developed conservation techniques, we've actually adapted quite a lot of it. The rearing of kestrels use techniques that have been used in falconry for hundreds of years. In terms of rearing of birds, again, I mean, we reared probably one of the smallest birds that's ever been reared from an egg. The olive white-eye, in this case, when it hatched out, it was 0.8 of a gram. We successfully reared that bird, and it was successfully released, and it's successfully bred. We are getting into use of drones for surveying rare plants. So on steep slopes, rather than try to send somebody down those slopes, which can be extremely dangerous, well, let's use drones to do the hard work and the dangerous work. We are using more camera traps in the field these days. But one thing which I found amazing is nest boxes. Well, we have 40 years of trying to fiddle with nest boxes, and we're still fiddling with nest boxes. And this is what we've done for echo parakeets. You wouldn't recognize the echo parakeet nest box that you would have seen in those days. They're completely different nowadays. And we show them the Mauritius kestrel Mauritius kestrel nest boxes, and we say this is how they do, and they get interested. And so rather than somebody else having to reinvent the wheel somewhere else, we say, well, look at this, because we've tried to design it this way, and that might be useful for you. And it's interesting that a lot of people who are trying to save parrots around the world come to us and say, tell us a little bit about your echo parakeet nest boxes. And nowadays, we make them out of recycled plastics. We make them out of PVC pipes, so that they can be longer lasting, so that you're not having to change them every 2 years. And then, very simply, so they're light. So you're not having to carry a 30 kg nest box on your back to go set it up. It weighs probably a half or a third of that. A lot of people who've been working on Mauritian and the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation have the possibility of handling birds. So this is probably the first time they are handling birds, if not rare birds. First time they are ever ringing birds. First time they are misnetting. First time they are trying to propagate plants or doing grafting of rare plants. First time they're trying to do dissection on mongooses or rats. First time they're setting traps, or they're learning how to climb trees here on the project. And, or even learning about biosecurity. You go to an island like Round Island, the level of biosecurity that you need to do there. And of course, then they go and work on some other island somewhere else. And biosecurity is second nature to them, because they've done it. They've been doing it for a year since they were working on Round Island. So it's a lot of techniques that people take away from Mauritius. And you are not taught these at universities. There are, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no university that teaches you these skills. So you come to the Mauritian Wildlife, you work a year or 2 or even 6 months, and you're getting a lot of these techniques. disease identification, taking samples in the field, preserving samples, a lot of this, just writing reports, how do you write simple reports and how do you collect data? How do you enter data? There are so many skills that we learn here.
What skills do you look for in a new recruit?
You'll be surprised at the answer. Passion. Passion is the number one skill. Second comes, what degree do you have? What qualifications? Of course, we need to know what you've studied. Then we look at what skills they come with. For projects that are sort of quite standard, such as the Pigeon project and the Pathfind projects, we will look for people who are fresh out of university, because it's on the job that you're going to learn all the skills. However, if somebody is going to work on KESTRELs, we would need that person to be able to ride a motorcycle. And sometimes we train people to ride motorcycles as well. And preferably somebody who's got climbing experience. It's working the field, staying in the field. We also look for things such as cultural sensitivity, because you're going to be meeting people who have diverse origins and cultures and backgrounds. And it's important that you fit with the group. People who would be okay roughing it, because going on islands or staying in the forest, you've got the basic comfort, but it's nothing luxurious. So you need to have the mindset to go for that sort of work. So those are the skills, but passion is definitely the biggest quality that we're looking for.
Vikash, what meetings or people or books have most influenced your thinking?
Well, the meeting is definitely Carl Jones, because I didn't have any notion about conservation until I met Carl Jones. So he's been a big influence on me, still is. Biggest eye-opener was when I went to Jersey in UK for the course there. It was a 4 months, now it's a 3 months course in endangered species management, and that was such an eye-opener for me. And that has really been a turning point in my career.
Vikash, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I just would like to say that it's been a pleasure talking to you, as it's a pleasure meeting ex-staff of wildlife and see how they continue to support us. And every time I meet somebody, I say, has the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation been of any positive influence to you? And it's amazing that everybody says, yes, that was really a turning point in my life. And this is what I want to hear, because if we haven't been, then we have failed somewhere. So if we've been unable to influence somebody's thinking, somebody's passion, or ignite something, I think we have failed. And I'm very happy that a lot of people I meet say, well, actually, Mauritius made me what I am. So, and this is what I love to hear all the time.
Absolutely fantastic. Vikash, I could talk to you for a week. I really could.
You should come to Mauritius. You should come.
It's a place where any aspiring conservationist from anywhere in the world should go and spend what we call a season and see conservation, innovative conservation in action. Vikash, you are the conservation director on the Mauritius Wildlife Foundation. It has various projects on endangered species, both plants and animals. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Practical Animal channel. Vikash Tataya.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John.